Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Mordian Glory video. In today's episode, we shall continue our analysis of the new 10th edition Imperial Guard Index. This time, casting our critical eye over the brand spanking new senior officer for the Astra Militarum, the Cadian Castellan. Coming in as a replacement for the generic company commander of previous editions, the Cadian Castellan is a high-ranking leader within the Astra Militarum and is intended to be a key support character. But can he stand up to the very good reputation of his predecessor, or is he a poor imitation? Well, there's only one way to find out. Without further ado, let's dive right into today's episode. As is tradition, let us begin with a brief overview of what the hell the Cadian Castellan actually is. Unlike Cadian command squads, who are led by a platoon commander who embodies the rank of lieutenant or maybe captain, Cadian Castellans are there to represent the higher ranks, such as colonels and majors. Whilst in some Imperial Guard regiments it would be highly irregular for such a senior officer to be anywhere near the front line unless something had gone spectacularly wrong, Cadians have always had a lead from the front mentality, and often even their most highest ranking officers can be found in the thickest of fighting. Of course, this is all fluff. What about crunch? What are the Cadian Castellans bringing to the battlefield? Well, to find out, let us take a deep dive into their datasheet now, and we'll start off with that unit profile and stat line. Castellans have a movement value of 6 inches, toughness 3, a 5+ save, 4 wounds, leadership 7, and 1 OC. This is a fairly typical guard character profile. We've seen similar things on commissars and platoon commanders, although there are a couple of exceptions that make it stand out. Firstly, you do have that extra wound. This is something you will find is fairly typical across senior officers in the Guard, even those like named characters such as Ursula Creed. You tend to find your platoon commanders and junior characters have got 3 wounds each. This is often because they're going to be attended by the other people in their command squad, and so they've got extra ablative wounds elsewhere in the unit. But Cadian Castellans are a standalone officer. They do not come with a platoon command squad accompanying them. They are literally one model to represent the entire unit. Think of them similar to a commissar or like a Space Marine captain in other factions. Another thing which makes the Castellan stand out from other officers in the Guard is he has an invulnerable save. Typically, when you look at the other characters we can take, unless you're a named character, you're probably not going to have an invulnerable save. All of our platoon commanders, Cadian commanders, none of those guys are getting any kind of shield. Cadian Castellans, being senior officers, being quite high priority targets for your opponent to try and take care of, they need the extra bit of protection. But let's be under no illusion. I've said this once, I'll say it many times. It pretty much crops up every single time I talk about Guard officers. Just because you've got an extra wound and a cheeky 5+ vulnerable save doesn't suddenly make you durable. That extra wound, that 5+, is a last ditch. It's an insurance policy. Even a basic volley of fire from a unit of sniper rifles is going to probably take care of the Cadian Castellan. Maybe you get lucky on the invuln, maybe you don't. Point is, don't expect this guy to be tanking a lot of damage, and still take the same precautions you would do with other officers in your army, because the best protection is not getting shot. But now let's move on to the weapons and war gear that this lad can take. As standard, he comes equipped with a rather uninspiring las pistol and chainsword, but he can swap that out for a few things that are a bit more potent. The las pistol can be traded in for a bolt pistol, which is a bit of an upgrade, or a plasma pistol, which you almost certainly always want to take. At the end of the day, we're in an era of free war gear. That may change in the future, but right now, there's absolutely no reason for you to go into battle with anything but the best, and the plasma pistol is better than the las pistol every single time. So make sure that you're giving them those little extra upgrades. In terms of close combat, you can swap his chainsword out for a power fist or power weapon. Again, there's no point in leaving these at home, and out of all of the weapons, I would actually suggest you just go straight for that power fist. In editions gone by, power fist meant that you had less attacks and you also hit a lot less accurately. They were unwieldy, often had a -1 to hit modifier. That's all gone now. 10th edition's got rid of all that. So the power fist, sure, only has 3 attacks versus the power weapon's 4 attacks, but those 3 attacks are at strength 6, AP -2 and 2 damage versus the power weapon, which is strength 4, which is a lot less than strength 6. It's AP 2, which does equal the power fist, but it's only damage 1. So unless you really want to run around with that ceremonial saber or that chainsword, you might as well be going for the power fist and plasma pistol every single time. One interesting thing of note that is worth mentioning, as far as I can tell, the Castellan is the only character in the guard who can swap a melee weapon for a ranged weapon. It is entirely possible for you to have your Castellan with his last pistol swapped for a plasma pistol and his chainsword swapped for a bolt gun. This is kind of cool. It means that at long range he can pop off a couple of bolt gun shots, and when he gets up close and personal he can start wielding that plasma pistol. But it does also introduce a rather interesting question. If you swap out the chainsword for a bolt gun, you don't have a melee weapon. I'm looking at his data card right now, and that would mean he wouldn't have any way of attacking in close combat. I could be being an idiot here, guys. Maybe there's something in the core rules that says everyone gets at least a close combat weapon with 1 attack. They've done that in previous editions, but if I remember correctly, that's not something they've done in 10th edition. But let me know if I'm wrong. Correct me down in the comment section. It would be kind of hilarious to have a Castellan who is all shooty and no choppy. Maybe he's part of a Tal fan club. I don't know. But like I said, let me know what you think down in that comment section. Regardless of what weapons you decide to give him, if we're being brutally honest, sure, you can be ruthlessly efficient and give him the plasma pistol and power fist, but 99.9 times out of 100, it's not going to matter. We are not Space Marines. You do not take guard characters to do damage. You take guard characters to act as force multipliers. If you're listening to this video right now and you think, oh bloody hell, I gave my Castellans all las pistols and chainsaw because I thought that would be a cheaper option, don't panic. Honestly, I guarantee you that you're almost going to forget what weapons he's equipped with. If it comes up at all, I'd be very surprised. The main reason you're taking him is for the buffs he can hand out to your other units, and he doesn't get that from his weapons, he gets that from the abilities. So with that said, it's probably worth heading on over to the abilities part of his datasheet. Now, to begin with, we're going to cover the most controversial one, in my opinion, and that is his leader ability. Now, you might think it's a bit strange saying this is controversial. I mean, loads of characters have leader. In fact, most characters have leaders. It's the exception to be a lone operative. I'm not concerned with the fact he's a leader. I'm a little pissed off about what he can lead. Because Castellans are apparently very judgmental and very snooty, and they don't like mixing with other regiments. GW's got this weird thing about segregating Cadians out from the rest of the other guard units, and as a result, your Castellan could only join Cadian shock troops, infantry squads, and Kazakin. I honestly don't understand the logic and thinking behind this 4 Games Workshop. Is it in the same ballpark as we're not going to make rules for it if we don't make models for it? I don't get it. It's really weird because in 9th edition they made this big thing about the new codex coming out and all the regiments work together now. There's no fixed regiment traits. Everyone will be told what to do. Cadians will be told what to do by Strachan. Strachan can tell Krieg what to do. It doesn't matter. Everyone just accepts orders. And yet you've got this thing where Castellans cannot join certain units. It doesn't really make sense to me. And it's really weird because the Cadian Castellan could only join Cadians, but he can still order around pretty much anyone that he wants, as long as it's not a vehicle. It's frustrating, it's backwards, it just seems so backwards, it seems so contradictory, and the real salt in the wound is GW removed the old company commander and replaced it with the Cadian Castellan. This honestly wouldn't be an issue if they just allowed us to continue using generic company commanders. It just feels really clunky, and I hope that whenever our guard codex comes out, or if GW decides to errata it or extend what this guy can lead, that he stops being so picky and I can put my Castellans wherever I want. Frankly, it shouldn't be called a Cadian Castellan, it should be a Castellan, and it should be able to go wherever I need it to go. But moving on to a more positive note, the unique abilities that the Cadian Castellan brings to the table are actually both very good and valuable. The first one is Senior Officer. While this model is leading a unit, ranged weapons equipped by models in that unit have the Sustained Hits 1 ability. This is just a straight up damage buff, and that is always a welcome thing. Fundamentally, 40k is a game about shooting each other's models and blowing each other up, so anything that helps you do that better is a good thing. I also like the fact that it adds an extra layer of buffs to your guard infantry. Unsupported, a guardsman squad isn't that much to look at, but you add a Cadian Castellan into it and suddenly it's taking aim and it's got sustained hits. You then start making that unit work with other units in your army, such as Scout Sentinels. Oh, suddenly I've got reroll 1 thanks to Daring Recon. Or maybe I use an Exterminator to give it an extra AP thanks to Withering Hail. Maybe I've also got Fields of Fire for another extra AP. My point is, Cadian Castellans are another vital link in that chain of allowing your guardsmen to punch well above their weight. He also has a second ability, Get Back in the Fight. While this model is leading a unit, that unit is eligible to shoot in the turn in which it fell back. Wow, that is really nice. That's the hidden gem. That's the secret sauce. It could be argued, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with someone if they said that is the main ability. Sustained hits is kind of flashy, but Get Back in the Fight is actually better. The reason is simple. In previous editions, Guard had to pick between falling back and shooting and doing other orders. Get Back in the Fight was an order. Now, you can fall back with your unit and still tell it to take aim. You get the best of both worlds. You can have your cake and eat it. Here's another way of putting it. Guard are primarily a shooty faction. And so a way for enemy armies to deal with us is to shut down our shooting. Now, sometimes they do that by killing our units, but that is often not an option. Sometimes you just need to get into combat with something so that it's forced to fall back and essentially you're taking it out of the game for a turn. Cadian Castellans completely and utterly hard counter that tactic. I can't tell you the number of games I've played where opponents have charged into my units thinking that they were locking them down, they were saving themselves from my firepower next turn, and then I've simply fallen back and shot. And I did that in 8th and 9th edition when I had to fall back and shoot without other good orders supporting me. The fact that I can now do it with Cadian Castellans and I still get all my damage buffs as well, it's really nice, and it's made an already good thing the Guard could do even better. However, I do want to caveat this slightly. Get Back in the Fight might be good on paper, but there is a chance it's not going to pan out in reality. At the time of recording this video, we're very much in a shooting meta. People tend to be blasting each other's units off the board from a distance. In that situation, Get Back in the Fight is kind of redundant. The good news is that Senior Officer picks up the slack, because if we're getting into a shooting war and that's the meta we're finding ourselves in, having sustained hits is good. The point I'm trying to make here is the Cadian Castellan brings a flexible set of abilities to the board, which should be good no matter how the meta decides to wax and wane. And the cherry on top, he's only 50 points. That makes him by far the cheapest officer we can take, not including commissars, who I'm not really including. Unfortunately, there is an elephant in the room, and it's also wearing a gas mask and holding a shovel in its trunk. We have to compare the Cadian Castellan to the Death Corps Marshal. Whilst the Cadian Castellan does bring a lot of good stuff to the table, I think the Death Corps Marshal is superior to him. Death Corps Marshal can do orders, but most importantly, he gives the unit a feel no pain. One of the things that Guard Infantry is able to do now is really stack on loads and loads and loads of durability buffs. It's something we've not been able to do before. For the first time in my living memory, we actually have infantry that can not only take ground, it can hold it. And fundamentally, that comes down to things like command squads with medipacks and especially Death Corps Marshals. I think the problem with the Cadian Castellan right now is he is providing lots of damage buffs to our infantry, but in a hybrid guard force, it's not our infantry which is doing the damage. Our tanks, our artillery is there to pound the enemy into dust. And it's important to remember that the fundamental nature, the most important thing that guard infantry can do is hold the line, be that screening or holding objectives. And anything that can help them do that job better, whilst the tanks actually kill stuff, is probably more valuable and probably more important to your list. So I'm not saying the Cadian Castellan is bad. He's not. He's a really good unit, and I don't want you taking the wrong thing away from this. And if you include him in your list, that's absolutely fine. All I'm saying is right now, a lot of guard players are getting a lot more mileage out of the Death Corps Marshal. Of course, all of this is like my opinion, man. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Are you Team Castellan or are you Team Marshal? And how do you think each of these characters should be used to the best of their ability in our army lists? Of course, if you've enjoyed today's video, don't forget to smash that like button and of course, subscribe to never miss an episode. And I just want to take a moment to say a massive thank you to all of the channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing. You truly are the lifeblood of the channel, and I couldn't do this full time without you. And I want to take a moment to say a special thank you to all of my top tier supporters. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So thank you so much to Alan Blunt III, Amy DeSweet, Bon Vert, Ken Starr, Mark Panconi, Ross Miller, Swordfish Trombone, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, and August Varney. Once again, guys, thank you. Genuinely couldn't do this without you. Your incredible and generous support just makes a huge, huge difference. I hope you all enjoyed today's video. Thank you for watching, and of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.